By far the biggest talking point after the Italian Grand Prix was McLaren's controversial driver swap at the end of the race. So let's get into it, breaking everything down. First of all, let's talk about McLaren's initial decision to give Oscar the priority during the pit stop, despite the fact that he was the car behind. Now, having run the numbers, I actually understand why McLaren chose to do it. Leclerc was 28 seconds behind Piastri, meaning that when Piastri pitted and came out, he was only 5 seconds ahead of Charles. Had Piastri had the slow stop like Lando did, it would have been very, very close on pit exit. In my opinion, it was the right decision to protect and potentially preempt a potential slow stop for Oscar and thus pit him first because, as we saw, if Lando had a slow stop, which he did, then they still came out second and third, whilst if Piastri had the slow stop, they could have easily come out second and fourth and actually looked like even bigger clowns for not pitting him first when Lando already had a safety buffer anyway. Unfortunately, Lando had a slow stop with the front left tyre not being tightened as quickly as it should have. There was some kind of malfunction because the wheel gun was flashing both green and red, meaning that although the mechanic thought that he had tightened it, he then had to go in again to fit the nut properly. The slow stop meant that Lando fell behind Oscar on track, after which the team issued an order for Oscar to give the place back. Their justification was that they wanted to keep the same order after the pit stops to almost make the pit stop a non-factor in the fight between their drivers, but inherently in racing, pit stops and bad luck will always be a factor even between teammates. Andrea Stella also cited McLaren's values and principles when they go racing that they wanted their drivers to follow, but in a backwards way, by wanting to make it as fair as possible between their drivers. To me, they are starting to interfere too much in normal racing situations to the point where it's starting to feel like race manipulation. And now, lots of comparisons are being made to Hungary 2024 when Lando undercut Oscar, partly because the team kept Oscar for 2 more laps on track instead of reacting straight away. Lando in a similar situation was also tempted to ignore the team orders and take the extra points, but also in the end let Oscar back past for his first Grand Prix win. The key difference in my opinion is that last year, Piastri wasn't a title contender, meaning that Norris had more of a reason to ignore the team order and take the points, whereas this year, both of them and only them are fighting for the title, meaning both of them now have a justifiable reason to ignore a team order and take advantage of the other's misfortune. The biggest difference, however, in my opinion, is that whilst Hungary was a strategical decision by the team that was accentuated by a very powerful undercut around that track, in Monza it was simply misfortune with a slow stop that hurt Lando. I made a video after the Hungarian Grand Prix last season saying that, in my opinion, Lando also should have ignored the team order because on that occasion, it was the team who put Oscar in that position and Lando was the only one that had a realistic shot of winning the title. That is why, although I understand why the team felt that it was right to swap positions in Monza, like Lando last year, because both of them are now title contenders and because a slow pit stop is a normal, albeit unlucky racing circumstance, I also think that Oscar Piastri should have ignored the team order and stayed ahead of Lando. McLaren have taken it upon themselves this season to manage this title fight and their drivers to the nth degree to make it as fair as possible between them because they want this driver lineup to last for the foreseeable future. They don't want it to just collapse in a massive toxic tornado, but there are things in racing like slow pit stops that simply can't be controlled equally every single time by the team, and I think that they are setting a very dangerous precedent by trying to control all of these situations as much as they are. Monza, in my opinion, crossed a line. The problem is that this will almost certainly happen again at some point this season because Lando and Oscar are just neck and neck almost every single weekend. And although they can justify swapping the positions this time, where exactly do you draw the line between bad luck and fairness? And what will happen the next time when the drivers don't see eye to eye? By interfering as much as they have been, they are setting a very dangerous precedent that every single race and every single similar incident will be treated the exact same way, and that they also expect their drivers to always follow the team orders because that's what they have done so far to keep the trust. However, if this was a championship decider and a very similar scenario were to repeat itself, with bad luck like a slow pit stop, flipping the drivers and flipping the outcome of the championship, there is just no way that either Oscar or Lando would give up their championship and follow the team order. In a way, the team is putting them in a bit of a compromised position because they are being morally put on such a pedestal that they're not going to be able to live up to. If the championship is on the line, then they would be justified in ignoring the team order, but then it kind of goes against everything that they have done so far. Even though I disagreed with Oscar's decision, I still understand why he gave the position back. It is easier for Oscar to do the swap and sacrifice those 3 points now, because coming into Monza he had a 34-point gap to Lando after a huge point swing in Zandvoort. However, had Lando not had that DNF, and had he been just a few points away from Oscar, it would have been very interesting to see if Oscar would have made the same decision and accepted a 6-point swing that maybe could have seen him lose the lead of the championship. I think the points advantage that Oscar has allows him to rationalize keeping the harmony and being more of a team player, but the moment that one of them goes against the team, that is going to be a firm line in the sand that will change the dynamic, and they will have to pick their spot very carefully in terms of when they want to do that and if it's worth it in terms of the points. I think for Oscar to do that for a 6-point swing probably wasn't worth it yet, but by giving away these points, it could become dangerous if Oscar himself suffers a DNF down the road. In terms of the racing rules and where exactly a slow pit stop falls into the subject of fairness, Oscar himself was actually a little bit contradictory about exactly what was agreed. In the car after the call was made, he said, "I mean, we said that a slow pit stop was part of racing, so I don't really get what's changed here, but if you really want to do it, then I'll do it." That to me is a clear indication that the team beforehand agreed that they will not interfere if one of the drivers is given a slow pit stop which might lead to a position change, because in his words it's just part of racing. After the race, however, when he was called out to explain that radio message and why he technically decided to accept the team order even though it went against what he said had been agreed to before the race, he was kind of flustered and gave a bit of a non-answer, saying, "I think the radio call kind of says enough. I'm sure we will discuss it again." And now I want to reiterate that I kind of understand in the minds of McLaren why they felt it was right to swap the positions back. But Oscar pitting a lap earlier had no real effect on Lando's race because the undercut was not as powerful in Monza as it was in Hungary last year. What did have an effect was a slow pit stop, which is a totally normal racing situation. It's not even something that you can say the team had any control over because, unlike a strategical decision like we saw in Hungary last year, you don't just decide to give your driver a slow pit stop. It's easy to play the game of, oh, well, if Oscar had pitted when he should have pitted, then he would have received the slow pit stop, but no one can say that for sure. It was simply a case of two independent pit stops with one being faster than the other, and because it led to a position change, the team felt that it was right to swap the positions simply because they didn't think that it was fair. As I said for Lando last year in Hungary, if I was Oscar at Monza, I would have kept the place and lived with the consequences, because honestly, these McLaren principles, although the intentions behind them are good because they want to keep Oscar and Lando as teammates for a very long time, in my opinion they're built on wet sand, and at some point or another, they are going to collapse eventually. In trying to create an equal and fair playing field, McLaren are starting to interfere too much with normal racing situations. They are creating unrealistic expectations of fairness between their drivers that they simply won't be able to uphold every single time, especially when the championship is close and there is a title on the line. The moment that one of their drivers starts to feel as though they are being controlled too much by their team and not allowed to benefit from things like luck, that could then easily break this entire facade of fairness that McLaren have decided to build. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.